Welcome to Open Book. My name is Ellie Hulst, and with us today is Margaret Willey and Amy Young, and my cohort from the Bookman, Amy Wilson. And we have enjoyed having some time to talk together already, and we're excited to be able to share a little bit more about who we are, meaning the Bookman in the community of Grand Haven. You know, how do the authors relate to it? How do we just relate to it? How long have you worked at the Bookman?
I worked in the Bookman for about 2 years in high school, and then when I moved back, I think I'm coming up on my 20-year anniversary.
I believe it.
Yes. I started when I was 10.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
even before that, as you both know, my mom still works there,
Right.
and worked there when I was a child, and then we were lucky enough to have my father there for about 7 years. And now with the third generation, it's my little joke, I make the kids shelve things. So it's the third generation of the Bookman.
Good.
Great.
Get started early.
Well, I have a photograph of myself probably 35 years ago giving a poetry reading at the Bookman. And I think it was the first time that I did do something outside of college, some kind of public presentation of my writing. So it's very precious to me. I have a long history of events and meetings and signings at the Bookman. It's a really important place, important in my life, important to my work. And Amy and I have done signings there together, and it's so important for our sense of community and involvement in the community. Our work is very solitary. So I just can't say enough about how important an independent bookstore is for a community of readers and artists and just people, children.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I second that with all my heart. My husband is an avid reader, and I am as well, and we love to go to the Bookman to get adult books to read. I mean, not, you know what I'm saying. And the one thing that's so great about an independent bookstore is you get to know the sales clerks, and you know who to go to for your mystery novels and who to go for such and such. And we recently went on a vacation, and I thought, we're going to read a lot on this vacation. And I went in and picked out 5 or 6 books, and different kinds of books, and some that were recommended by people there, and some that looked good to me. And I just know that everything is going to be pretty good because you have already pre-selected for us. But then as an artist or as an author, illustrator, the Bookman's been so important to me because your father Charlie was there when I had my first book published, and he was really like a muse to me because I think he had more confidence in me than I did at the time. I could talk to him about what I was working on. He was always so enthusiastic, and I just always looked forward to seeing him. I still cry sometimes when I think about him. I've got this obituary that you wrote. That's one of the best obituaries I've ever read.
Thank you.
Good writer there.
Thank you.
A really, really special person who I think was just formative in my own development. In fact, some of us even created an Order of the Muse.
I showed
Charlie.
yeah, I showed that to Sophie.
Yes.
And I think of him as just so much a part of the Bookman, and the Bookman carries on now.
Yeah, he left some
It was
big
begun in
shoes.
1974, and Jim Dana then gave over the reins to John and Judy Wanders in 1991. And yes, it is a community place. You know you're a community place when somebody comes in the store and asks for directions, or somebody comes in the store with gifts and says, "Would you help me wrap them?" Or, "Do you have a box for me so I can send my book away?" So we are definitely a community place.
And I hope people realize that they need to support places like that, because a lot of independent bookstores can't survive anymore. It's harder and harder for them. And so I'm one of these people, if I hear about a book I want to read, I will actually go and order it from the Bookman. I may even find it online, but I won't order it online. I'll pay a little more at the Bookman because it's worth so much to me that they stay viable, because they're just a part of my life, not only as an author and illustrator, but as a reader, and community member.
Well, there's a lot of awareness now, and increasingly the importance of community in cities, in all cities really, but in a city like ours, to support that, to have a bookstore that's a meeting place and kind of a point of light in a community. So
Yeah,
it's
a
really
meeting place, meaning not only can you get your tickets to the high school play or to the Central Park Players play or concerts and so on, but like you say, a meeting of people also.
of friends, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Well, Amy, one of the things we'd like to find out a little bit about, as an illustrator, you're letting us peek into what that looks like, and we're excited to hear a little bit about how you do that.
Okay, well, I can take you through some of the steps from the initial idea to publication, because I think a lot of people haven't seen that, and it's just kind of interesting for most people. When I first start, I often the writing comes first, because it's pointless to do a lot of drawing and then have the story change and change and change, as it often does, and you have to redraw and redraw. Although sometimes I will start with little sketches, little visual ideas. But I don't really start putting the story together until I have the writing. And then one of the first things I usually do is a whole bunch of thumbnail sketches. And these are just really small, and often they are the size of your thumbnail. And it just gives me a sense of where the words are going to go and what the pictures are going to be. And the pictures take 5 seconds to do. So it's very easy to change. You're not overly committed to it. And it's very, very fluid. I don't show those to anybody, except you guys, but I don't show my editor or art director to get their approval. This is just for me processing how I'm going to put the book together.
Do you keep like all of those? I mean, I can imagine you doing more than one, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I often have, I work on a kind of paper that's very easy to erase, so there's a lot of erasing and drawing harder and harder, and so sometimes I'll just keep it on one sheet, and sometimes I'll do several. It depends on the book. And then the next phase for me is to do a dummy book, I call it, and well, that's what it is called. It's like I tell kids, a dummy person is sort of a fake person, and a dummy book it's sort of a fake book. It's not really the book, but it gives me the idea of what's going to happen. And it's really taking the thumbnails and expanding it so you can really see the words, and I really start working out the details of each illustration. And then what I do when I've got that all worked out, and sometimes I'll really work on it for quite a while and redo several illustrations over and over. Sometimes they'll come right away and the first one's the best. A lot of times, as I go along, I realize, well, this would push the action better than that. And when I'm happy with it, after, say, several months usually, I'll send it to my art director. And they will look at it, and often the editor will look at it too, and I'll get comments back. And usually they have some kind of changes to make. Often they don't have lots of changes, but sometimes they do. So then I make their changes, still in that pencil form, and then I'm finally ready to do the final art. So an example of final art is, this is a picture from Belinda Begins Ballet, and she's just very little, and she's finding out the uses of having big feet, and she realizes that she can ski without using skis, and that's really great. She also finds out there are some difficulties about having big feet, but that's where she is on that one. And then I hand in all the finished artwork, and sometimes there are little tweaks on that. They'll send back 1 or 2 things if there's some inconsistency, or they think somebody's head is too big or something. So there's always some little thing that has to be tinkered with. So I'll do that. And then I don't really see it again for a while. I get some proofs back, and then they put the whole book together. And for the first book I did, one of the first books I did, they sent me this wonderful huge sheet, and this is the only book I have it for. And this is what happens in China or wherever they're getting printed. The whole book is printed on the front and back pages of this massive sheet, and the pictures are all out of order. Some are upside down, some are right side up, and then they put it in some huge machine, and it gets all cut and folded, and when it comes out, it's the inside of a book. And I would love to see that machine, because I think it must be just amazing to see that happen. And then finally, about, I don't know, 7 months to a year after I sent it off, I get the first copy of the book in the mail. And usually by the time I finished doing the artwork for a book, I'm so sick of it. I'll never want to see it again, because I've been living that book, eating, drinking, sleeping that book. And but after all that time's gone away, and it comes back as a real book, it's like Pinocchio, a real boy. It's it's such a thrilling moment. So, and for the Belinda books, they even made this little bendy doll as a little promotion, and I have a few of these left, and that's kind of fun too.
Just out of curiosity, you kept saying, and we mail it, and I get it, and we mail it. So between, it sounds like almost a year and a half, you haven't actually spoken in person with anyone in New York or wherever it is your publisher is? Is it mostly all done through the mail?
A lot of it is emailing.
Okay.
They'll email lots of comments. Every now and then, if I'm confused or if it just seems quicker to talk, we'll talk.
Okay.
And I'm actually going to New York later this week to meet with editors, which isn't necessary. There are a lot of people who have never met their editors, but I really like to meet people. I just feel better. And one of my editors at Viking has gone to a different house, so I want to meet the new people, the new team, as it were, because I haven't met all of them. I've met most of them. And then also go see the editor who just moved at her new place. So I like to do that. I like to...
Yeah, that would seem natural to me too. I was just curious because it seemed like, oh, it sounds like you made contact and then the rest was really up to the mail.
Well, then it's really email these days. I mean, it used to be they would send me back the dummy I'd given them with little stickies on it and comments written in, or the manuscript with handwritten comments. And now you get back this computer program stuff. There's something where their comments are in red and the deleted things are in blue, and so everything's getting, more
digitized.
Digitized, that's the word.
Without paper or paperless.
And it works just as well. So
Sure.
it's not a problem.
And you don't have to worry about something getting lost in the mail,
That's
which
right.
would be
That could be. That could
Can
be,
happen.
certainly.
I've been fortunate that hasn't happened yet, but that brings me to the very worst moment in an illustrator's life, and that is when you pack your whole precious book up and send it off to New York, and is it going to make it? I wrap it up in all this plastic in case there's a storm or a flood, and send it overnight.
That's when I could envision you taking it.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
But you can't take things on planes these days. I'd have to drive it, I suppose, because it's too big to carry on a plane by the time it's all bundled up. So.
For sure.
And Amy, you work mostly with gouache?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's more of a, I had to find out what it was so I could
How to
explain
say
it to
right?
my
Gouache.
children.
It's got every vowel in it.
But it's really just an intensely pigmented watercolor, isn't it?
That's right. It's water-based, but unlike watercolors, you can layer over it without the color going dead. Watercolor looks horrible if you layer opaque paint down, but the gouache you can do that. Yeah, and that is what I generally use, although the book I'm working on right now, I'm using acrylic, which is kind of exciting because it's a little bit of a departure for me. So I'm a little terrified, wondering if it's going to work out or not, but I think it is. It allows me to do some things that the gouache doesn't.
Sure. Is it affecting your style? Is it harder to do small details, for example? Or?
It's, well, the thing I'm liking about it is I can really tinker with big background spaces more. I can layer things and things can come through or not, or I can completely redo it. And with gouache, even though you can layer, when you're doing large areas, it tends to get kind of mottled and not so good looking. The other thing I'm liking with the acrylic is gouache paint is very vibrant, but when it goes to print, it loses a little of that vibrancy. And so for some of my books, it's a little softer feeling, and that's fine. But this is a book about two boys, and I want it to have some real visual punch. So the acrylic seems to be the better medium for it.
So obviously you're both working on projects because we were talking about the fact that Four Secrets is your newest book. Can you give us a glimpse of what that title is, or where are you in that one?
It is called Don't Eat the Baby. And the story's all done, and I'm doing the final artwork, and no babies do get harmed in the making of the book. Nobody gets eaten. It's basically told from the point of view of a 4-year-old who gets this new baby brother, and he's not really sure the whole thing's a good idea, but he becomes very alarmed when everybody starts saying, oh, I could just eat him up, the way adults say all the time. And so he feels that he really needs to look out for this kid because he knows it's not right to eat the baby. And it was really kind of based on a true story, in that I have a friend who's a new grandmother, and she would just say, I could swallow them all, I could eat them up. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then my editor had just had a baby, and I said, oh, you have to send me some pictures. And she sent me a picture, and I said, oh, those cute fat cheeks, how can you stand it? And she said, I can't. I just want to take a big bite out of him. So I sent her back an email. It said, don't eat the baby. And we were talking about another project that I was working on, but she wrote back and said, I may sound crazy, but I think this is a good title for a book.
Really?
So that's how that one got started.
So that was really kind of, well, not initiated, but it came from someone who knows you as a writer and
Yes,
illustrator.
I have a great
to encourage
relationship
you.
with this editor, with all my editors really, and and that shows how it can really be this nice symbiosis that she can help. And, So that's
Is that
one.
a similar statement we could make about your relationship with editors? I mean,
Well, the last few books I've done, I'm working now with a young man at a press out of Minneapolis, and I'm really enjoying working with him, and I'm doing more with male characters, so it's important to me to have his input. And yeah, I feel like it's very positive.
oh, good.
It's a very positive relationship.
So it's not just email going back and forth. You really do get to know the people a little bit.
I mean, a little bit.
A little.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I feel like he really understands what I'm trying to do. And you need to feel like your editor really, it gets you,
Right.
and
You're on the same page.
yeah, you're on the same page, and it's wonderful. When it's working, it's wonderful.
One of the things that I enjoyed so much about Four Secrets was the different points of view. And when you read a book that's written by somebody you know, you kind of think of that person, I never had a thought of you in my head
Oh, that's good.
the whole time.
I just disappeared.
In the most positive way. But I could picture that boy writing in his journal. I could picture the type of kid he was. I could picture Katie, who I think was
Yeah.
my favorite. I
Yeah.
think she was my favorite character. And even Renata, everything was so clearly drawn. You could really see everybody.
Yes, and I do feel like with that book in particular, or maybe because it is newer, I feel like I just love those kids. And yeah, it's very maternal.
Did you want to sort of help them, like the social worker is
Yes,
helping
I
them?
did. I mean, I think that actually there was much more presence of the social worker in the early drafts.
Oh.
And it was my editor's view that we needed to pull her back and make it be more, what's happening with the kids. And he was absolutely right. But I think, again, it was that impulse to have her, to just sort of have her be sorting everything out and rescuing them. And he had to remind me from time to time, to let it be the kid's
Right.
story.
I think that was the real beauty of it.
Yeah, it's an audience
It was the
awareness
kids,
thing
right,
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. As opposed to feeling like, I'm gonna hammer you with how it should end. No, let the story just come.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that was very helpful for me.
And I noticed that in many places in the book, she is referred to as the social worker. You don't use her name, Greta. Was that a distancing kind of?
Yes, because I think that's how the kids would see her, especially
Sure.
at first. That she would just be her title,
Right.
and
And to build trust between them.
Right.
I mean, that takes a while.
Right.
How did you come up with the name The Great She?
Yeah,
I
really.
love that. I love
that was just Nate. That's one of the characters, and he writes in kind of an overblown fantasy novel type of style. And that was what he came up with, The Great She. I mean, I don't remember exactly when that occurred to me. As the creator of Nate, I don't remember, but I remember, I actually have Nate say, "What did you think of that? Wasn't that clever of me?" And that's a little bit of me, saying that through the character of Nate. So that was fun.
And gray mounts, that was very, you could visualize somebody very powerful, sort of a Joan of Arc character on a gray horse. I thought that was quite a good visual description.
Yeah.
Do you read fantasy at all?
I read it very rarely. I did read, I read a lot of Tolkien, and Nate is a Tolkien fanatic. But some of the newer fantasy stuff, I don't really follow it. Although I have nephews and a grandson who were kind of obsessed with fantasy. So it was very easy to create a boy who was most comfortable in that world.
You were just talking about relatives and how they connect to your book. When you first have like your dummy book, or you know, you're ready to get that #1 book, do you share it first with family members?
I think that I used to. I don't know. I feel like now I do that less now.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's not like that anymore.
It's not so much about my family anymore. It's more about you know, the readership and friends that I know who really understand what I'm doing.
Or
And
maybe
be honest.
Yeah,
And we'll be
that's
honest.
true. That's good.
And I do share things with my husband because I really value his opinion. You know, I think he's a, sometimes I will say, okay, this is early in the process, so I want to know what you think, but you have to say only good things. Generally, you know, I just wanted to say what he thinks, and it's a good eye and good ear.
Yeah, that's great.
We talked a little bit about the working as an author and having your own space. What are some of the pitfalls about being an author?
Oh, there's so many.
Top three. Top three.
Well, I'll take one. I think that this working alone, which, you know, one of the things that I talk about with students is that, you know, if you're a people person and you see yourself working with the public or on a team, or, you know, if you're going to be a writer or an artist, you're going to be working by yourself a lot, and that has to be okay with you. And there are times when it does feel like, you know, the solitude gets to be a little bit too much, and then you have to find a balance. So that would be one thing, I think, just all the solitary working.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I have a dog and a cat too. They always keep me.
Unconditional love all the time.
Well,
No?
there are a lot of demands. I got to go out. I got to come back in. I got to go out. I got to go in. Are we going to go for a walk? This is
So
getting
you like
boring.
distraction, maybe.
Yeah, they kind of keep me focused on, you know, what you're doing isn't all that important. You know, I don't know. Keep me real.
And as far as rewards go, now Amy, for example, you got to research one of your books in Paris.
That is
right.
one of the great things. Is, yeah, sometimes the research opportunities are really wonderful. Yes.
Have you been able to do any sort of travel?
You can do juvenile detention.
Well,
I went to Paris.
Yes.
That was
Boy,
really,
boy.
that was very luxurious. Well, but yes, I mean, I think the research is really, sometimes you do more research than you need, and it just becomes a really important part of the process. It's one of the gifts, I think. And yes, you know, there's always a little bit of travel involved for me.
I know the Clever Beatrice books are based on French-Canadian fables. Did you get to go up there? Or?
Yes, yeah. I took a long road trip with my daughter before I wrote the third Clever Beatrice book, Clever Beatrice Christmas. And we just drove all through Quebec, and it was just wonderful. And I mean, none of that really made its way so much into the story, but it was really important for me, just in terms of my connection to the character, and also as a little bit of a reward for, you know, for my interest in that particular type of folktale.
Well, great, you guys. This has been most enjoyable. Margaret Willey, thank you for coming and taking the time to be with us. Amy Young as well, and Amy Wilson. Thank you for being with us for today at Open Book.
I'm Amy Wilson of the Bookman in Grand Haven, and these are some of my favorite picks. One of the best things about working at the bookstore is that occasionally we get a big box of books from the publisher that has not been released yet. The books have not. One of the best books I have read, and what I am going to be recommending, is a book called The Secrets of Mary Bowser. Mary Bowser was a real person. She was born a slave, emancipated, moved to Pennsylvania and got an education which would not have disgraced a white girl in those days, and then made the choice to move back to Virginia and pretend to be a slave. The reason she did this was so that she could spy in Jefferson Davidson's White House. It's a very exciting book, and it sheds light on a horrific condition, but you will cheer for Mary Bowser, and you know the end of the war is coming, so that's a good thing. Another book I enjoyed very much, it was the third book in the Starvation Lake series by Brian Gruely. Starvation Lake is a fictional town in northern Michigan, not doing too well, fallen on hard times. The main source of excitement and even income is the youth hockey league. He explored that in his first 2 books, and this third one is dealing more with his family, specifically his mother, who has dementia and is really should not be living on her own. And he discovers some secrets about her that tie into a town mystery, and that's all I'm going to say. Another book that is really beautifully written and is on our bestseller list right now is Carol Anshaw's Carry the One. You may have seen reviews in People Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, USA Today. It's a story of what happens after a split second's poor decision and terrible accident, and how it affects the people involved with the accident for the rest of their lives. Very well written, and I recommend you check it out.